Regardless of whatever any individual leader thinks their personality is or their leadership style is, the reality is that your job as a leader is to positively influence people. So it is reasonable then for any leader to understand certain elements of human behavior.
How are you going to get the people to come alongside you beyond just the directive of like, you do this, you do that?
The command and control style is not effective anymore. It's going to get you initial compliance, but it's not going to actually get you commitment and loyalty from your employees, and you do lose efficiency in the long run.
Hello, everyone. This is Mwano with Mwano Consultancy podcast on workforce success. I am here with my good colleague, Andrea. Andrea, how you doing?
I'm awesome. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm really looking forward to our podcast today. We're going to be talking about the importance of leaders building social capital within their team. Yes, social capital internally within a workforce. A lot of times when leaders are thinking about their responsibility and their roles, a lot of times they're getting measured by process, operations, and systems, right? How well are they moving things forward? But sometimes when it comes to their engagement with their employees, the social capital side is usually not as defined or clear. But the impact of it is that you can't win people over just by focusing on operation. You win people over by understanding who they are and displaying different attributes and behavior and characteristics that they would feel more comfortable to get on board in following your leadership or even trusting you. So in this podcast, we're going to focus on that because some of the partners that we're working with, it is a hot topic as we are trying to help build stronger culture and climate, but also more importantly, helping to change some legacy practices that will require some social capital. So, Andrea, I wanted to start off with my first question with you. Why is having a strategy behind building a social capital as a leader is important? Why is that important?
So I believe that without having a strategy, then you have no real intention behind how you're building relationships with your team. So when I hear the word strategy, to me, that means intentionality. So especially if you're a new leader or if you have some new objectives, you're trying to, some of the partners that we work with, they're looking to change current cultural problems. And so when you're looking to do that, you have to define what your objective is, where you're trying to go, and then map out a strategy to get there. So without being intentional about what social capital means to you and for your team, and then how to get there, then you're not going to make it happen. You're going to keep moving and making decisions based off of the probably whatever fires in front of your face that you have to put out or solve. And I think also without that intentionality, it's really easy to get sucked into the day-to-day tasks and, answering emails or responding to something that your boss wants you to do, what have you. And you lose the important work of connecting with your team, building trust with your team. And then you don't have the social capital. So without an intentional strategy, it's just not going to happen.
And we say there's two sides to that. In many of the work that we do at Mwano Consultancy, we like to separate the giving and the receiving. So in the giving, you're the person that's doing, you're enacting a certain behavior or action that others are in the receiving end of those actions. And when you're in the receiving end, that means someone else is doing something where you're on the receiving end of a. And when you think about building social capital, it's really important to try to figure out what that looks like, right? So at times it might be when you're on the giving side, so it might be a deliverable, whatever it is that you're guiding or directing people to. And when you're on the receiving end, it might be, what are you actually doing to be receptive of those who are reporting to you or those you are working with, for them to feel that you are genuine, you are considerate, and you're going to be fair, right? So some of the words that I'm using are some of the words that are part of our 7 principles that we work with many organizations to try to help them actualize some of the intentions that they have as an organization. But on the social capital side, there are different elements in there that's so critical to really make sure that it's reflective in the leader's behavior. So I'm curious, when you are on I usually start with the giving side, but when you're on the receiving end, right, as a leader, let's say you are new to an organization, you're brought in and maybe at a mid-level or executive or senior level where there's a good number of people that are behind you, and you're brought in to help move things forward. How can you set in stone certain things in terms of your receiving end so people will know that they can trust you, they can rely on you, you're going to be fair, you're going to be considerate? On the receiving end, what are things that leader can do in order to ensure that as folks are beginning to get to know them, they can say, wow, this leader is really this, or this leader has done this already. This gives it, it provides me an opportunity to believe that this person is going to lead us effectively. What are certain things that folks can do in those positions when they first join an organization?
So I think it's important to recognize that your team that's underneath you are equal stakeholders in your success as a leader. So I think often a new leader might come into a position and they're looking to build social capital up the hierarchy. So they're worried about making a good impression to their boss, or responding to their boss's expectations or needs, and learning what their boss is looking for from them, which is really important. But if you consider the team that you supervise and oversee as key stakeholders, then you should also be seeking to understand what they need from you, and what they need to do their jobs the best that they can do them. And recognizing that ultimately you're responsible for the successful operations of that team. So it is really important to connect with every person that is getting the work done, and showing them that you care about their experience by asking questions or making observations, noticing them and inviting them into a conversation about where their challenges are, asking them what they would like you to know about them as people, about the work that they're doing, about the challenges that they face, the successes that they've had. The more you can come in and learn about your team, the more they're going to trust that you care, because they're seeing the action of caring from you by being present and asking questions and learning about them. I also believe that demonstrating respect to people is something that will build social capital and trust, because when people feel seen and understood and respected, they feel more comfortable being their authentic self and being honest with you. And I used to say this on repeat with my old team and my last job: honesty is productive. So you're going to be a lot less likely to get just lip service, or for people to tell you yes or whatever they think you want to hear, if you can show them that you actually want to know the truth about how they're doing at work and where their challenges are and what they need from you. And then you can actually solve the problems that you need to solve.
So a lot of the example that you gave, I heard something that you said that really relied on action, right? Because a lot of times leaders are, inspirational, and they have some really inspiring statements they might share or say, which is fine and dandy. But most folks are going to measure them by their actions. So a lot of the stuff that you're saying is actually the action behind what you're saying you're going to do. But it's also important to already have a lens where, when you think about your effectiveness, where you're already considering that, yes, being in a new environment, I also have to build a positive social capital across the people I'm going to be working with, the people that report to me. So one of the things that we do a lot in a lot of our work when we're helping in this is we like to have some of those early wins, and it looks different from one organization to another, but you do need to have some sort of wins, right? Where you have demonstrated an approach that reflects either how if they had a good previous leader that was in that role that was really good at displaying certain behavior or thing that employees loved, or if it's you're bringing in a new perspective where there's some pain points in the past that employees have expressed, that you're providing an experience that's contrary to those pain points. Those are areas where that leader can get some early wins. And in a lot of our coaching, we find that at times it's really hard to sometimes articulate that to new leaders, that like, yes, you're going to come and provide some new SOP, right? System of operation or of process, or some new ways of doing things, or you're going to cut costs, whatever it is, whatever the executive team or the leadership team that brought you in to solve. Those are all great. You have the skill set. Woo! Congratulations. But we always ask, how are you going to get the people to come alongside you beyond just the directive of like, you do this, you do that? Because it is critical in how people view you. And the early wins that you get, the better it is, that's going to reinforce. Mm-hmm. And sometimes folks struggle with that. We have leaders that we work with that might say, hey, well, some of this stuff is just common sense. And we're like, yes, it's common sense, but it's not common sense because it hasn't been activated or acted upon here on a frequent basis. So as you get to know your organization, you have to figure out, how can you show a different experience that's positive in order for you to build that capacity? And a lot of times we have to kind of walk alongside that leader to say, hey, you need to maybe do this. Can you show up during different lunchtime with different teams, and maybe you bring a little something, right? Because people always like a little, if you have a little food, people love food. And then how you come alongside folks. Or maybe if there is we do work with partners that have different time frames, right? Different shifts. So instead of just focusing on maybe the morning shift or the day shift, be able to visit the late night shift, come alongside them, because maybe that's a group that feels unseen, right? So there's certain things you can do. Or it might be a memo, right? It might be like a shout out, right? If a team that you just came in, there was a milestone that happened and they did a great job, even though you don't really know them, but it was disclosed to you, do a recognition, right? And that team being recognized might ignite their ability to feel like, wow, this person really understands us or sees us, right? Because sometimes certain teams are not seen, right? Mm-hmm. So there's so many different ways that you can have those early wins, but it is so, so critical to have some wins in the beginning, because that's what builds social capital, because people are going to see themselves through the work that you do. So when someone new comes into an environment, Andrea, there's so many different responsibilities and they're trying to acclimate, right? There's so it's like new environment, new space. Like sometimes you might even reflect like, am I competent for this? Am I the right person for this? And things are all over the place and you have to prioritize what you're going to do first. And a lot of time you are going to focus on system and process. How can you also carve space to be able to do things that are going to positively impact the social capital? What are things that folks can do? Because I feel like we talk about it often and people go into an environment with that in mind, but then the priority is usually not that within the first couple of, this is the first 30, 60, 90 days. I would argue that the first 30 days, you want to have at least one or two wins that's going to build capacity around your social capital in order to build authentic relationship and trust throughout your team. So how can they prioritize, right? So we're talking about prioritization here, right? How can they prioritize that they get, even if it was small little wins within that first 30 days, because you want them to get those wins.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I believe that the mindset of like service leadership would be really beneficial in that situation. If you're trying to create early wins with your team, you do need to take the time to get to know what they need and want.
Get to know them.
Because that will define what the wins are. Because you might say, oh, I'd love to do X, Y, Z, but that could fall flat with your team if you haven't taken the time to get to know them. So if you're thinking in terms of your 30, 60, 90 days, so bake into that plan where you're going to find time to connect individually with the people that you directly supervise in particular, because those are also the people that are getting the work done. So getting to know them and letting them speak about the work that they do is going to build some trust with them, and it's also going to help you learn about the operations. So I like to think of relationships and business outcomes as mutually beneficial, and you can definitely learn more about operations at the same time as you're getting to know your people. And that will give you a key into what early wins you could offer them. You might learn something about some really low-hanging fruit kind of an issue that you could make an immediate change on or improvement on, and that becomes a really quick win because you've taken the time to listen to the people that you oversee.
No, that's a good point. And the other thing I would say, the importance of setting that expectation between you and the people that you're reporting to, or the person that you're reporting to when you come in. Mm-hmm. And kind of challenging them, because a lot of times when you would look at the orientation map, there might be nothing in there that's focusing on social capital, because it's like you get oriented in this system, you learn how this is like, to be able to come back and be like, actually, I would like to allocate maybe 10 to 15 minutes of this first week or this first month just to build relationships with the team. Mm-hmm. Right. And when you do that, it makes it more realistic for you to actually have carved out time to do it. Because if you don't have time to do it, then before you know it, it's been 30, 60, 90 days. And we've experienced that with some of the folks that we work with, where, it might be 6 months that they've been in the job, and it's like they're finally poking their head out. It's like this should have been part of the process right from the beginning. And a lot of times they say, oh, when I came in, this is what I wanted to do, but then this got into my plate and I wasn't able to get to it. But then you have folks that are reporting to them saying, oh, I've never seen this person. I don't really hear from them. All I see is through email, and I don't really know who this person is. Because in certain environment, people will size you up, right? Yeah. If you're a new person coming in, people are gonna be like, who's this person? What are they? Right? Like, it's like we've been in an environment where someone's like, they're really sizing the new person up. Like, regardless, it could be a president or an executive in an organization where the employees are really just sizing them up. They're like, hey, you're not gonna really intervene on my day to day, so I have nothing to lose. What are you all about? I need to see this before I feel comfortable enough to trust. And it's like, yeah, sometimes some employees put unrealistic expectation on you people too. That's true, yeah. Right? But at least one thing that you were saying earlier that I think is critical is being able to get to know. Mm-hmm. If part of your strategy as you're getting onboarded, if you don't allocate time to get to know the people, then you don't really know, that's the cheat sheet right there, right? Because when you get to know the folks, what they share with you will be an indicator of what certain things you might need to do in order to build that social capital, because you want that social capital to be relevant. That's the other piece. If it's not relevant, you can throw all these things in there, and then folks are gonna be like, well, that doesn't really matter. Yeah. Right? You didn't come and see us. Yeah, that was cool, but you didn't do this. So as you're getting to know the employees, what they're sharing with you, you have to have your little sheet, right? Your little cheat sheet to be like, oh, maybe do that, right? Because what it does is it show that you've listened, it show that you care, it show that you're present. Mm-hmm. And then that also comes with humility, right? Earlier you were saying that sometimes folks will focus more on who they report to or even their colleague, mm-hmm. right? Because in certain organization, there might be a couple of colleagues that have more influence than other colleagues. So they have to, they have to play a little politicking. So they spend most of their time building social capital that way versus actually coming alongside the employees on the other end. And sometimes when you don't have that humility as a leader, you might also marginalize the team that report to you or a department mm-hmm. that report to you. You're like, oh, that's just those folks, or that's just those folks. Right.
And chances are when you do that, it's actually going to harm your operations. If you don't take the time to get to know people and their experience of the work and leverage their knowledge of the system as well, then, you might come in and make decisions and try to move quickly and impress people. And actually you're causing a bunch of backlog or problems down the line because you don't know the system yet. And the people that you're supervising and that you're working with are the ones that do know and that can help you, understand.
That's so true. But I also like to be honest, because sometimes when we talk about like words like humility and vulnerability and compassionate and caring, like in a work environment, it's like, oh, that's great, but that's not really realistic. We got to get stuff done. This is work. And also, sometimes it feels like it's a sign of weakness, right? Folks say, oh, well, I'm not that type of leader, or that's going to undermine my ability. No, you can still, lead a very strong, high productive team by also displaying those characteristics that helps people feel at whole. It doesn't mean that you're, through humility, that means you're weak, right? So you let things bypass, or you compromise. No, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means that you're using your tools to build authentic connections. So then what you learn about your team, you can do things that might help to create alignment and build that collaboration. So words like humility, compassion, consideration doesn't make you a weak leader. It actually gives you the insight so you can be effective in how you lead your team, right? And I wanted to just hone in on that, because sometimes you have a high performing team and a leader is coming in. It's like, we got to, it's like, oh, great. How did you go about showing up as you were delivering those tasks or those, did you consider, right? And I think humility from a leadership standpoint is a very important part, because people that are on receiving end of your humility, they see the humanity behind you, right? And it builds respect. It builds, wow, they came to second shift, or they came to third shift, or they came to a department, or they came to a factory, or wherever, the environment that you work in. It goes a long way. And some people might say, oh, the last time we had someone in your position come visit us was never. So even, right? So those are the easy things that you can do early on to just build that capacity. Again, all right, let's move on the social capital. So
can I add on to something you said, though?
Please do.
I think that regardless of whatever any individual leader thinks their personality is or their leadership style is, the reality is that your job as a leader is to positively influence people. So it is reasonable then for any leader to understand certain elements of human behavior. So the concept that we're talking about here are well-supported ways in which human beings come to trust other human beings. And there's different there's different levels of leadership and types of authority that you can have as a leader. And the command and control style is not effective anymore. And it's going to get you initial compliance, but it's not going to actually get you commitment and loyalty from your employees. And you do lose efficiency in the long run when that's your culture. And worst case scenario we've seen where trust completely breaks down because of that style of leadership, or failure to recognize the importance of building trust within your organization and operating as a leader with respect for just how human beings work, that it does end up breaking down the day-to-day operations. It's not just about, oh, we want everyone to feel, happy here or whatever. That's not what is meant by being humble, being empathetic, and being vulnerable and showing people respect. These are all elements that have been proven to create trust and loyalty and buy-in within organizations.
Oh, 100%. And I think part of coming alongside, especially within the first 30 to 60 day, definitely shadow, right?
Yes.
Roll your sleeve up, whatever department or work it is, come alongside to learn about what folks do, and you can attempt to do it as well, especially early on. Hopefully that organization has some sort of a transitional period, right? Because when you come alongside, it goes a long way for people, but it also gives you insight of where the success might be in the process, but also it might give you insight around where some of the pain points are. But so when you do it through humility, then there's really there's nothing that, you don't need to second guess yourself to be oh, I am the executive, or I'm the director, or I'm the senior kadukadoo, that I have to oh, I am scooping down to the level of, well, no one really cares. Just reflect.
And they can tell if that's your mindset.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're distant, this is the stuff that we learn in a lot of the work that we do. A lot of the partners that we work with, we have a lot of insights around how employees feel about their culture, feel about leaders that lead them. And a lot of that comes from what the pattern of behavior has been for so long. I think there's a fine line between perception too, but the reality is if employees have already made sense of somebody in a certain way, like regardless if it's true or not, that perception is going to impact how they see you and how they're going to show up and work through stuff, right?
And people's perceptions are based off of their experiences.
100%.
So if you're trying to create a certain relationship or perception of yourself with your employees, you need to consider how they're experiencing you. So you could sit there and go, oh, I have all these great intentions, or we made this decision that was the right decision based on what they told us they wanted. And when you think about, okay, but what did your employee actually experience? Did you communicate to them that this decision came from this piece of feedback that they gave, or is there a complete disconnect for them? Because then they don't see it. Or if you think while you're, sitting at your computer and you're answering emails, you think, yes, I care about my team, I want to get to know them, but you don't ever actually get out there, then what they've experienced is, I haven't seen my supervisor in however many months since they've started. So, what you give time to is actually what you've prioritized, regardless of your intentions. So going back to at the start of this, how do you prioritize it? You need to come in you need to actually genuinely value that and see that that's going to have a positive impact on your ability to influence and lead your team.
100%. And I wanted to stay on the perception real quick here because a lot of time people say, oh, I can't control how other feels about me. But when you're a leader, you do have to care about how the team that you're leading feels about you, because if it's true or not, then it gives you an opportunity to figure out what am I missing here in the way that I'm showing up that's telling a different story. Because at the end of the day, if people don't trust you, respect you, then outside of the operation, if you have an efficient team that can get things done, awesome. You might just keep going because the team is good. But if you have a team that needs you on a consistent basis, in order for you to build that momentum, the negative perception they have on you needs to be confronted. And you're the only person as a leader. It's your responsibility to confront them, not confronting it from like a confrontational, frictional standpoint, but confronting it by making sure that if the behaviors are contrary to how it's being received, then you need to be able to close the gap in order to demonstrate something differently in order to change that. Because if the perception is negative, it's going to still come back. And a lot of time we deal with this with many leaders that we work with. They always come back and say, oh, I don't know how they would think that way. Well, first of all, there is a minimum inquiry that occurs on a consistent basis around leaders taking in information about how their team feel and think about their experiences, right? So that's one. So you have to have some sort of an intake form or information sharing where you're getting at real time, if it's biweekly, monthly, of where your employees are and how they feel about certain things. And you got to be able to receive, you got to be receptive to the constructive feedback, regardless if it's true or not. If it's true and you're able to take ownership and say, oh yeah, actually I do that, then there's an opportunity to change. If it's not true, then how can you demonstrate the other things that are, that there's noise and friction that's not showing it? Because it's your responsibility as a leader to make sure that you are challenging those perceptions from your side in order to improve the experiences of how they see you. So as we come towards the end of this incredible podcast, what are like two things that you would say to a leader who might not prioritize the importance of building social capital within their team, to evaluate and have some actionable, intangible things that they can do to make sure that they're building on and are creating the space to improve and iterate, right? Because part of this is you learn over time, right? You continue to learn and you make changes because your team is a living organism, right? Like it's breathing literally, and they have a lot of different moving parts that's happening. But if you think it's dormant, then you're always going to miss the opportunity to come back to check on people. And sometimes it's seasonal too, right? There's different time of the year where different things might be happening with your team that might be stressful, or personal things that might happen in our society that's impacting your team, right? Like to really be reflective and being intentional in your leadership. So what are two things you would tell the leaders in order for them to be more open and receptive to have actionable things that are going to help them build their social capital?
I would say, number one, I guess if you're a leader that is struggling with seeing the value of building social capital with your team, I would recommend reading 5 Levels of Leadership and the Speed of Trust. And just educate yourself on what that actually means and what is the work of building trust and social capital with your team. I would also encourage you to just try it and see what happens, because there's some really simple things you can do that are pretty low stakes, that don't necessarily take up a lot of your time, and you'll probably see immediate positive impact on those actions. So make 30 minutes to just meet someone on your team. Even if it's not 30 minutes, give them 15 and ask them how their day is going.
Even if it was 60 seconds.
Sure. Yeah. Any amount of time where you are genuinely focused and caring and curious about another person. So just little things like that, or being really clear about setting expectations and follow through. That's another simple thing that you could do to build some capital and trust with your team. Look for those low-hanging fruit opportunities. Don't overpromise, but actively look for ways where you can solve a problem or find that win, and see what that impact is. I think the biggest thing is just open up a door to have conversations with your team and get to know people.
Super. Andrea, time flies when we have this podcast. Thank you so much for being with me today on our Workforce Success podcast. If you're listening, please share, and we look forward to our next topic. And again, ask questions, be led through humility so you can come alongside people, get to know who they are, and figure out what it means for you, things you can put in place as a leader so you can be intentional. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.